total seeing, which is the quality of the mind. There is no seer, no observer, no experiencer. There is only seeing. The mind then is completely awake. In this fully awakened state, there is no observer and the observed. There is only light, clarity. The contradiction and conflict between the thinker and thought ceases. So what he talks about, what he calls negation, is the voluntary embracing of, could say, the relinquishing of thought when it's not required. So, if that power grows in you, the power to relinquish thought when it's not required, then, of course, you're fulfilling your purpose for being here, which is the awakening of consciousness. And whatever you do when you're connected with that vast spaciousness within you can then become empowered, because you're no longer acting from egoic self and its desires, what it thinks it needs to feel more happy, to feel more complete, fulfilled. You're not acting from those desires anymore. You're acting not as a separate entity, but this very power acts through you, and anything that you then undertake as action, whether it's speaking or doing, has a power to it, because it's in alignment with what the universe wants. It's not the little me that thinks it's a separate entity. This is what I want. And so it becomes empowered. Your life becomes empowered, becomes an expression of that. But you have to find that place of power first. You have to go deeply into it and realize your oneness with it. When we talk about it in words, we will create always a duality, as if there was you and the power. Ultimately, that the power is the essence of who you are. So it's really finding knowing who you are, and then realizations come, even interesting thoughts may come that weren't there before, because that's where inspiration comes from. Empowerment comes from the source. But you're not doing it as a means to an end, then it doesn't work. You go there not because you want to become successful in the world. That's not the true relinquishing. It is in itself the most satisfying thing there can be. It is already fulfilling, so it's not made into a means to an end. And whatever else then happens is the icing on the cake, to coin a phrase. Whatever else happens is added on to you. It comes out of that power. It reflects that, or as I said just earlier, it's the diluted power that becomes whatever is here in the life of form. Now, probably the books that came through me and the teaching that comes through me that could not have happened if I had not spent probably 10 years mostly being still. That was my main activity. I would, yes, occasionally talk to people, occasionally do some counseling, but vast spaces of my life were just emptiness. And the depths grew, the emptiness intensified. And then 10 years or so passed, and then I knew that this could express itself in a more in this world. There was a function that was meant to happen through me, that this power wasn't actually not reaching many people. And then one day, perhaps I should have done it earlier, but probably the 10 years were necessary. I've told this little story before. I went to a little village church in Somerset, near where I lived. One of these ancient churches you find in English villages, like 600 years old or 700, or even going back to Norman times. And there was nobody in there. And there I just said, it's time for acceleration. Or I would like acceleration. And then nothing happened. A few months passed. I had forgotten that I'd asked for acceleration. And then suddenly I woke up and realized I have to leave England. And I have to move to the west coast of North America. I don't know why, but I had to do it. So the energy was too strong. And then when I arrived after a few weeks on the west coast, the power of now started to come through. And then it grew, and then the writing stream became more and more empowered. And I realized that was the acceleration. And I didn't realize it was only the beginning. And so it went on and on. And then the acceleration took on other forms, and at some point the acceleration took on the form of Oprah. And that was all, it was almost breathless, so be careful with what you ask for, especially if you contact the place of power. You can ask for, if you're not in touch with essence, you can ask for many things. You're lucky if you get a few, but if you're in touch with essence, you can ask, but what you ask for in essence corresponds to, it's not egoic anymore. It comes from the essence, so that's good, because otherwise you could create havoc if the ego could get in there. But if the ego is there, the essence isn't there. If the essence is there, the ego is either absent or just remnants are still floating around. So Krishnamurti, he often wondered where he had a strange perception that the power would sometimes come into him, and then at other times it left him. So he would sometimes say, he was not continuously connected with it, but he would sometimes say, oh, it's gone now. And he became kind of childlike. Where's it gone? It's not there now. But he had this... and then suddenly it came back, and the moment he gave talks, it would be there very powerfully. And he didn't understand it, because nobody can understand it. He couldn't figure out, what is this power? What does it want? Well, it's doing already what it wants. We cannot fully comprehend it through the mind. Here's a little piece where he's walking around Rome, And I think he's walking down the Spanish steps, which you know if you have seen Rome, this famous staircase. Walking along the pavement is British for sidewalk, by the way. Walking along the pavement, overlooking the biggest basilica and down the famous steps to a fountain and many picked flowers of so many colors. I suppose they were stalls selling flowers. Crossing the crowded square, we went along a narrow one-way street, quiet with not too many cars. There, in that dimly lit street with a few unfashionable shops, suddenly and most unexpectedly, that otherness came with such intense tenderness and beauty that one's body and brain became motionless. So he's walking along and suddenly he goes, an intensification of presence, which perhaps was a presence was already there before in the background. But then when he talks about otherness, presence comes in so strongly that it almost obliterates everything else. Suddenly and most unexpectedly, that otherness came with such intense tenderness and beauty that one's body and brain became motionless. For some days now, it had not made its immense presence felt. It was there vaguely in the distance, a whisper. But there the immense was manifesting itself, sharply and with waiting patience. Thought and speech were gone, and there was peculiar joy and clarity. It followed down the long, narrow street till the roar of traffic and the overcrowded pavement swallowed us all. It was a benediction that was beyond all image and thought. There was great bliss, a great ecstasy that perished at the touch of thought. And of course it was that is the place out of which the teaching, we call it Krishnamurti's teaching, but of course it's not a person's teaching, that is out of which that powerful stream that came through him, that was the very foundation for it, that was the source from which it came. But it could have manifested, the power could have manifested in itself in other ways. If he had been an artist, it could have manifested in that way. If he had been a scientist even, it could have manifested as sudden, deep insights not arrived at through analytical thinking, in the same way that it came to Einstein and very few of the great scientists. The great leap forward. Yes, analytical thinking is necessary, especially if you're a scientist. But if you for the great breakthroughs to occur, even in science, there's a leap from analytical thinking to realization, which can sometimes be verified later through further analytical thinking or research, as was the case with Einstein's theory of relativity. But the realization came because Einstein was a person who was familiar with the states of stillness. He was so still, even in his childhood, that his parents thought he was retarded, that he was so slow. So it can flow into anything. It flows into you meet other humans, then suddenly this dimension flows into your speaking and your actions. So the ego asked, how can I become more powerful? And of course the the unfortunate answer is you have to die first and then the power is there. The ego, of course, being the mind-made sense of self, the me that always is needy and insufficient and always feels there's something not right here. It's okay, but there's